We'll get into the Canadian women's national team as well, and it's not quite as upbeat as it is in other parts of Canadian soccer because the women's national team continued to struggle to end 2025. A 3-0 loss and a 1-0 loss to Japan. They've now gone 5 games in a row, failing to score each time in those matches. This team cannot seem to figure it out right now. The opponents have been difficult, but the best opponent they beat this year was Mexico, which is close to 30th in the world. Is that more their level now? Or are they still a top 10, maybe we're saying top 15 team in the world at this point, Brendan?
God, I certainly hope that's not their level now. But I do think you're right that maybe we are talking about them as being, instead of a top 10. And oftentimes, when they were 8th, I felt that was unfair to them, that they should have been ranked higher. But yeah, we might be talking about them as being a top 10, a top 15 team now, certainly heading into the World Cup. And should be fearful that might be, stick around for a decade. That is what Christine Sinclair and Sophie Schmidt and Steph Labbe warned about publicly in their beef with Canada Soccer, right? That there wasn't a pipeline. And I'm not going to go into the specifics and say that there isn't a pipeline and that's the reason. But there was clearly, a decline coming in the program, and you might be seeing it now. At the same time, having said that, I can't go, and break down these games, with the sharp analytical eye that we usually watch it, because these weren't games to do that with. But what you would have hoped was that the quality, and in the past, usually their quality shines through, even against good opposition, that they don't seem to look so flat. So did they play better in the second game? Yes, they did. Was the second game any more entertaining to watch? Absolutely not. Do you have a long list of takeaways, Alex, and a long list of players that you think, played really well, and given another 30 minutes or another 60 minutes against Japan, we would have seen this? No, I think everyone was happy to pack it in for the rest of the year, take some time away. There's a lot of reflection that needs to happen, and then I think you really are going to be starting over, come March with a totally new cycle. There's a lot of players because of injuries and now because of age that would have been a key factor and played a big role this year and didn't play a role at all and may not play a role again. And so, I don't know how much they can actually take away from this year heading into next year, because I genuinely think that next year will be so different in the build up to that 27 World Cup. But to end 25 the way they did, it was disappointing, Alex. You just want to see them, put the ball in the net. They did some things well, but they did a lot of things pretty flat and just at times didn't look like they had an identity anymore.
Yeah, the warning signs have been out there for a while, because you mentioned the decline, I think, of 2023, the World Cup. They didn't even make it out of the group, which logically meant they weren't even among the top 16 teams in the world at the time, right? Because they didn't make the round of 16. Then the Olympics, they make it. Granted, very different format, a little easier to make it for CONCACAF when there are 3 teams that make it from Europe by comparison. And side note, really cool that I think there rumors, or even it's true that they're going to go to 16 for the women's tournament at the next Olympics. That's so overdue that I think it's going to makes that tournament a lot more interesting for everyone involved. But yeah, for Canada, the warning signs started there of, okay, that World Cup was really jarring, especially the way Australia demolished them. Australia was always the sort of level of team that you'd expect Canada to comfortably hold their own against and not get played off the park the way they did. But yeah, it's really this year, the worst part about these last 5 games in which they failed to score is that I'm looking at 5 games where they were severely outmatched. Because these are friendlies. At the end of the day, the results are secondary. Had they lost 5 in a row, but there were 5 good performances, you'd be like, all right, you know what? That's good. If there were five games where young players were playing too, fantastic. They're going to learn from this. What's worrying about all these games is they struggled massively in all of them. The U.S. game was the first one. I guess it was in hindsight, it was the canary in the coal mine, because it was not fun to watch just how physically outmatched they were, technically outmatched. All right, move on. Switzerland. Okay, that's Canada. You'd expect to beat Switzerland. The Netherlands, a good team, completely outmatched them. Casey Stoney is furious after the game. Then they go to Japan, and Japan's good. Japan always seems to have Canada's number, but man, the first game, how outmatched Canada looked was unbelievable. It looked like they weren't even playing the same sport. They couldn't win duels. They're getting physically outmatched, technically outmatched. The physical one was surprising too, because typically Canada, that's the one area they have an edge on Japan. It's Japan's, they're not the biggest team. They're not the strongest team. Canada couldn't even win duels against them. And then, like you mentioned, by the last game, they looked okay, but not great. And Japan too, one fun fact that I wrote about this on One Soccer, in each of the 5 games Canada played on this losing streak, they had their average lineup was almost 27.5 years old for their starting lineup, and they were the older team in every single game, including against the Netherlands, who literally, it was a retirement match for one of their players who was in their mid 30s. For me, that is also incredibly jarring because we're 2 years away from a World Cup. Since Casey Stoney come in, her framing has been prepare for 2027. When I see an average age of 27 and a half, what do I think? Oh my goodness, if you ran this same lineup for the next 2 years, they would be 29 and a half by the time that next World Cup comes around. By comparison, the US, and to use the US, I think it's a fair comparison. After 2023, there was some kind of chatter of, are Canada and US in the same spot? Canada had a disastrous World Cup. The US lost in the round of 16. Felt like the US was old. They were stagnating. You're thinking, man, is it over for CONCACAF? To think that since then, the US completely refreshed the group, brought in Emma Hayes, won a gold medal in 2024. This year, they handed out, 16 debuts? They've been playing with like an average age of 23, 24 at times. They've been giving their U23 players opportunities, U20 players opportunities. That's what's most jarring for me from a Canadian perspective, because yes, Canada doesn't have a talent pool like the US, but to think that the US has regenerated the way they have, and Canada is still sitting here with largely the same squad from 2023, sputtering, it just feels like this year has become a bit of a waste. And that's worried because the time's quickly ticking. The CONCACAF Championships is less than a year away. The World Cup is less than 2 years away, and that will catch up very quickly to them.
And when you look at that World Cup pathway as well, there's, also the fear that they could miss it. There's still that one snapshot you get to qualify for a World Cup in CONCACAF. It's not an extended qualifying campaign like you have for the men. And so if they're bad for, 2 weeks, that's it. They're done. Like that is what's at stake in the next year. And that's a worrying factor, Alex, that if this team doesn't figure it out soon, and I know that maybe they are closer to figuring it out than these recent friendly show, but missing the World Cup is a legitimate possibility for this group now.
Yeah, well, it's something you have to think about. I mean, I think the next one is still 32, or have they gone to 48 yet? Because I know that's why I still think for the World Cup they'll be fine. They did cruise against Haiti and Costa Rica this year, the sort of teams they'll likely have to beat, especially in a 32 or 48 team environment. But it is a bit worrying that it's going to be harder than it needs to be. And you just think of what this team would look like in 2027. That really is the big worry for me. And like the thing is too, with this year that's so jarring, like we mentioned it at the beginning of the year. This is a free year. It's not often in football you get an entire year of friendlies to experiment, to play around. The reality is we don't know much more about this team than we did at the start of the year. Yeah, we learned a few players like Holly Ward are closer to being ready than we thought. But
Emma Regan.
Well, yeah, Emma Regan is a great shout. We got to see a bit of Sarah Chavoshi earlier in the year. I thought that was good. Kayla Briggs, but we didn't see enough of them. Like, Brendan, just to throw this out at you, who do you think led the team in minutes this year, if you were to ask? Just to throw it out there. Or this can go to you, Ben.
Was it Emma Regan?
She was in the top 5, but it wasn't Emma Regan. Yeah.
Was it Adriana Leon?
She was, I think, in the top 10. It was 33-year-old center back Shalina Zadorsky.
No way. The most minutes?
Wow. The most minutes, and she played in every single game, the only player to feature in every single game. And that's, Shalina Zadorsky is a good center back. She's been very good for country when called upon. But in a transition year, a 33-year-old center back will be 35 by the time the next World Cup coming around. And she's when everyone's healthy, 3rd, 4th choice behind Gilles Rose Buchanan. That's a bit of a worry. Like, this should have been a year where you get, yes, some players you haven't been able to see as much, like Olivia Smith, because of injuries. But man, there's a lot of other young players you could have called up throughout the year. Kaylee Hunters, the Geneva Hernandez Grays, etc. For me, that's also a huge worry that, yeah, they just haven't developed these young players enough, because we know the veterans they have are capable, but they've clearly hit a wall as a team. And it feels like these young players coming in will be what they need for it to hit a new level going forward, Brendan.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. And it's, again, if we were to go and dissect the pipeline and compare the quality of these young players coming up to the teams of the past that were automatic top 10 teams in the world, I think we would find it very difficult to do that and still feel as confident, as we were talking about these teams in the past, and even heading into the season, right? I think what's really disappointing is like, because they dealt with some injuries, because they're having players out of form, we haven't really got I still feel like we don't know what Casey Stoney's Canada looks like. And I hope that we'll get to see that in 2026. But because of some of the factors, including needing to either rebuild or really like retool, as you say, push out some of these older veteran players that you just can't be relying on heading into a World Cup that's still 18 months plus away. I don't envy the situation that Casey Stoney's in, Ben.
It's certainly going to be a difficult one for Canada to figure it out, but it's potentially improving next year. They can get a World Cup qualification. They can check off a few things and kind of close the door on 2025, because these were difficult friendlies. Like there's no putting it against that they wanted to test themselves in these last few friendlies, and you go get good opposition to do that. They won some of the other friendlies against the lesser teams, but when we see this team in competitive games, that's when we'll really be able to get a sense of where they're at, even with the injuries that are continuing to plague this group. And I don't know if you'll ever see, a full strength, healthy Canada, whether that's at a World Cup or regardless. Like, injuries are just a fact of the game, and they seem to be impacting this Canadian women's team a little bit more than usual.